Okay, I'm going to show how to build the OmniPad first. This is the forward section. This is the leg section. Go ahead and get this wing nut off here. Make sure. Okay. Red is the left side, green is the right side. Make sure you have those facing the correct way. Have the leg ends down. And slide it up into the back of the pad. The wing nut onto the bolt. And now we have the legs on the pad. Next step is the elevation strut. There's a long end and a short end. The short end at the top with orange band. There's also orange band on the pad's post. Take off the wing nut. Put the diagonal strut in. Make sure that these screw heads are facing out and the nuts are facing inside, because the pad will not work right with the tail struts. Okay, now we have it attached up here. Down here is where you attach the forward end of the diagonal strut. Depending on the launch angle you want, there are 10-degree increments, 90 degrees, 80, 70, 60, and I put 50 on here, though rarely would you ever want to use 50. So I'm going to build this at 90 degrees. Taking off the wing nut, attaching it where it's set at the 90-degree setting. So that has the pad assembled in this way. This turnbuckle allows a fine adjustments of the launch angle. For rocket glide use, 60, 70, 80 degrees, you're not going to need that really, but when you use it vertically with some other launcher like a C-rail, a piston, a normal rocket tower, other things like that, you'll find this to come in useful for adjusting the launch angle. Okay, the last step of assembly of the OmniPad is to get the lateral brace into position. You can usually leave this brace on the leg set for storage and transport. So usually this wing nut I'm putting on here, you'll just keep that on almost all the time. Okay, that's got it down there. It does not matter which end of this strut is used. There's no top or bottom part of this strut. Each end is about roughly equally the same. And so that completes that assembly. This is added to make sure that the OmniPad cannot sway left or right. So there we have it, left side, right side. Then we're going to show how to attach the tower head. This side you want to go against the vertical post of the OmniPad. Okay. The holes, I've colored them yellow. Use 1.5 inch screws. Heads of the screws, I've painted those yellow. Attach those to the vertical post. Using knurled nuts. Could use wing nuts, and knurled nuts are a little more convenient for attaching the head. Okay, So the head is on. Just to review, the OmniPad is pointed into the wind in this case. This is upwind. This is downwind. This would be the top of the glider's wings. This would be the top of the glider's wings that you would be looking at from this configuration. Okay, now we're going to show how to start assembling the rails of the tower. This aluminum angle goes on first near the center section. Notice the top of this has an arrow. Also the end is bent inwards a little bit for the side. This shows this is for the left side of the glider. It's on the right is the image you're looking at. This will be on the left side for the glider. So I'm going to use this L angle. Also, this is this rail. It has a green color code at the bottom. Always put the color code at the bottom when you're using the rails. Here's a spacer. The spacer is also color coded green. And also the bolts are color coded. You start with the rail. The heads of the bolts have to go inside of the rail, so turn it to where there are the large holes, put the bolt all the way through the head inside. Then into the spacer. Pull them all the way out and insert them into the holes in the L angle. We have this whole subassembly here. Again, green color code at the bottom, and on the angle, L angle, arrow at the top, and the bent tab in this way. And insert them into the holes in the tower head. Use the wing nuts to secure on the other side of the head. Just before you do a final tightening of the wing nuts, make sure that the rails are parallel to the lines that are drawn on here, because there's a little bit of leeway. You want to have 1 1/4 inch gap between the two. I've added a second set of rails. You can see how they've been assembled. Okay, now we're going to add wing rails. Add the wing rails in pairs with 2 rails. They're red colored. And you also use 2 spacers. The assembly starts by putting in the bolts. We're working on the right wing's rails right now. That is, the glider top of the wing is this way, the belly of the glider is this way. I put on 1 spacer, which is 1/2 inch. Put on 1 rail, and adding the second spacer, and adding the second rail. Should also mention that the bolts for these, the heads of these, are color-coded red. They're 3-inch bolts. And that takes care of the right side. Okay, I've added the left wing's set of rails. And next, this is a very special assembly that's used for the tail. It's for the bottom of the stab and also for rudder alignment. This piece here, make sure the arrow is pointed up. This color-coded blue has 2 rails. Start by putting bolts into one rail and making sure the arrow is pointing up. Go ahead and slide this through. It's a pretty easy fit. Then put the other rail in place and add the wing nuts. So there, that completes the assembly of this unit. Now at the very top of the rails do have some, these look like nose cones. They're not. They're just little guides so that when you put the model in place, you wouldn't hit the top of the rails and bang the tail on it. That it'll go on either side of these. You will want to be sure that you have the stab on the correct side of this when you put the model into it. Here's one tricky thing about this sub-assembly. In order to make things as low as possible, so to work with Alyssa's reach, this diagonal strut, I would have normally had it mounted up a few inches more, but I put it down as low as possible. That has caused some issues with clearance on this piece. That's why the corners are angled. And it's not possible to attach this while the diagonal strut is in this position. So, need to temporarily move the strut up. And slide this into place. Like that. Then you can reposition the diagonal strut. Always making sure to put the wing nut in place. This in position. Put the wing nuts on this assembly. Okay, I'm going to use one of my old gliders. It doesn't really work with this pad, but I'm going to show how the tail goes in. It's just like this. So always make sure that the stab goes up against the main rails, then slide down with the rudder in between, like that. Okay, so far I've shown how to assemble the pad and the tower. Most of the tower is done right now except on the rails, except for the extensions. There are 6 extension rail pieces. They're all the same length, 20 inches long, plus their joiners. So I'm going to put those in place. And that's it. That's all it takes to put the joiners into place. I do want to point out, for launching, because obviously it's hard for even me to reach up this high, what you do is take the 2 wing rails on the upwind side, take the 2 off. That will allow the glider to be loaded, because I'm sure Alyssa should be able to reach high enough to put the wings in here. Make sure the wings go in between these 2 rails and carefully slide the glider down into place here. After the glider is in position in the tower, then remember to put these 2 extensions back into place. The last 2 pieces that go onto the tower are the deflector. This goes in here. Now the deflector, you can adjust the angle in this way. Is a little screw adjustment here. Whatever's needed for the model. And the other piece, this one, is for holding the micro clips. This is the umbilical post. Just plug it in here. And the micro clips, just use this to clamp them into place. And that will hold the micro clips a safe distance away. The clips will go across here and then down, and that should keep the clips from tangling on the glider. That completes the assembly of the Omni-Pad and the tower. There is one more thing left in the assembly. Once you have the tower assembled, you put it in the launch area, position it where you want it. Then you have got to stake the front end of the pad down. Always, always stake the front end of the pad down. And unless it's pretty calm, you may want to stake the rear part down. That's what the screw eye in the rear is for as well. If you stake down both ends, this pad is not going anywhere. Okay, here's the pad and tower disassembled the way I would usually disassemble it for transporting in my car to and from the field. I don't take the entire tower apart, except when I'm going on a plane trip or need to ship it, or unless the car is really going to be packed tight. So from fully assembled to this state, this took me between 3 and 5 minutes to get it this way, which also means to assemble it back together again at the field from this condition would only take about 3 to 5 minutes on the field. So it doesn't have to take a whole lot of time to assemble and reassemble the whole thing unless you really want to or need to.